Welcome back to Hard Truth, Real Talk for Real Growth. Today's conversation is going to center on what I had to unlearn so that I could grow. Most people spend their lives focused on what they need to learn, but I've discovered that some of the biggest breakthroughs in life have come from unlearning things that were never true in the first place. Many of our beliefs are shaped by pain, trauma, disappointment, rejection, and unmet expectations. And what helped us survive one season can sometimes keep us stuck in the next. Today, I want to share some things I had to unlearn in my own journey. And my hope is that as I share these lessons, you'll begin to question some of the beliefs and perspectives you've been carrying. Because sometimes freedom starts with asking one simple question: what if what I believe isn't actually true? So let's get into it. Get ready to discuss the hard truth. Welcome back to the Hard Truth, episode number 4. You guys have been offering me some great support. I look forward to you continuing to share this inspiring podcast with your family, with your friends, anyone in your sphere of influence that you feel could benefit. So let's go ahead and get into it. This is your host, Jaynee Sasso. This is the Hard Truth, Real Talk for Real Growth. And so the first couple of episodes, I talked about why we don't have good conversation anymore. How come we can't just have civilized discourse? And a lot of the anger and hostility and the rage that has developed in our public spaces and our online spaces has a lot to do with people not feeling confident in what they believe. They don't really understand why they believe what they believe. And so, therefore, when someone challenges their perspective and it threatens the very essence of how they've operated in life, then the rage and the anger ensues, because at the end of the day, change is hard for all of us. I think you all would agree. Change is hard. And so when you are challenging someone's perspective, and that means that change is going to be imminent, then the natural tendency for those that are not emotionally mature or spiritually mature is to simply go into a rage or to shut down completely. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into it. I think sharing my personal story, you'll hear me share lots of testimonies because I haven't started this podcast simply because I just woke up with an idea today. I've walked a very challenging life journey, and I feel as if I can help each and every one of you navigate your difficult seasons and your seasons of prosperity as well in a much healthier way. So, I had to unlearn that everyone was not out to harm me. Sounds simple, but when you have experienced trauma like I have, then you develop a natural habit of seeing and recognizing harm when it approaches you. And I've done a lot of understanding of studying of the human mind and the brain and what trauma does to a person, especially when you have experienced trauma in your childhood. It actually, those experiences actually change your brain. They change your ability to how you develop. All of the things that have witnessed in myself, and often wonder, what is wrong with me? Why can't I just be a child? How come I can't just have fun? How come? How come? How come? That was the question that launched my healing. It led me into a journey of healing because I asked that one question: how come? So I had to learn that one of my issues was I did not trust. And when you've been hurt, you start expecting hurt. You become guarded, suspicious, hypervigilant. You start looking for danger everywhere. And if you've experienced trauma, you understand exactly what I'm talking about. But I had to learn something different. I had to learn that I am safe. Not because evil doesn't exist, not because people can't hurt me, but because God is my protector. And I have learned to experience him as my protector. Scripture says that the weapons may form, but they shall not prosper against us. Notice what it doesn't say. It doesn't say weapons won't form. It doesn't say attacks won't come. It doesn't say betrayal won't happen. It says those weapons will not accomplish their intended purpose. And as I have often discussed in my podcast and will continue to discuss, you have an enemy. You have an enemy to your soul, whether you believe it or not. And if you can't observe the world in its current state and know that there is a difference between the light and the dark, then I don't know what to tell you, folks. But there is an enemy to your soul, and he has plans for you. But the good news is God has the final say, and he has the authority in your life if you have surrendered. And we'll get to that a little bit later. And so when I truly understood this, I stopped living in fear and I started living from trust. Key point: you need to identify if you are living from a place of fear or are you living from a place of trust. If you don't have a God, if you're serving a God that you can't trust because that God operates in fear, then I hope that this podcast will help introduce you to the God that I know that will allow you to be set free from living from a place of fear. I had to unlearn that serving God does not exempt me from suffering. I grew up in the church. I've been saved since I was 12 years old. Started out in a traditional Baptist ministry, a lot of hooping, a lot of hollering from the pastor. You have the hoop pastor. It wasn't a charismatic or Pentecostal church. So at that time, I did not witness the shouting and the dancing. Usually, if someone expressed their worship to God in that way, it was usually stifled and tampered down. So I had to unlearn that it wasn't about checking the box on God and just doing these things to prevent pain. Because as I was growing up, that was what I was looking for. I was looking for an answer to stop the pain. And I think many Christians quietly believe this. They're maybe not intentionally, but unintentionally taught this. And it causes us, when we're taught this lie, it causes us not to trust God because we think if we obey God, life should get easier. And when then it doesn't, then we lose faith. So I, at that time, actually thought that. And I feel as if, for the most part of my young Christian journey, that was what was communicated to me, even if it was not intentional. But as life happens, disappointment happens, loss happens, hardship happens. What I discovered is that serving God doesn't exempt us from suffering. Hey, you read your Bible, Jesus suffered. He came here to suffer. So if Jesus has to suffer and he came to experience what we would experience as humans walking this life's journey, then hey, what more can we say? So serving God changes how we experience suffering. Some of the deepest things I've learned about God have come through difficult seasons, not the easy ones. You learn his faithfulness when resources are low. You learn his comfort when your heart is broken. You learn his strength when yours is gone. Sometimes suffering isn't evidence that God has abandoned you. Sometimes suffering is where God introduces himself to you in a much deeper way. So when it comes to your faith journey, you have to know that there are different aspects to how you need to experience God: healer, protector, provider, all of those different things, defender, father, friend. There are different aspects to God's personality, as you have different aspects to your personality. And depending on how someone approaches you or their relationship to you, they are going to experience you in a different way. So difficulties and challenges and suffering in life allows us the privilege to experience God uniqueness in his character and in his ways in how he relates to us. Another thing I had to unlearn is that I can't do life alone. Again, trauma often teaches us independence, but it's not a healthy independence. It's a survival independence. The kind that says, I'll just do it myself. I don't need anybody. I can't trust anybody. I remember being in college, hadn't really healed, just starting my healing journey. I remember a young lady, we lived in a quad, and I remember having a conversation with a young lady that I guess I finally was available to have conversation with. And she mentioned to me that I was trying to be your friend. I knocked on your door, I passed you in the hallway, tried to have conversation with you, and you just blatantly said, I'm not here to make friends. Yes, folks, that was me. That is the response of a person that is hurting and is very distrusting, because the reality is we cannot do life alone, because everybody needs somebody. As the saying goes, no man is an island. And God designed us for community. In fact, he gave Eve to Adam because he said that it was not good for man to be alone. So relationships matter, accountability, we need it for support, all of those things. And although isolation often feels safe, it does become a prison. And some of the healing that we're praying for can only happen through healthy relationships. Let me tell you, getting married and having children and having those relationships have been some of the most transformative years of my life. Even having employees and having relationships with them, business relationships, all of those relationships have been transformative in my life because they have taught me different things about myself, the world around me, and the individuals that are in it. So don't let past wounds convince you that you don't need people. You definitely need people. I had to unlearn that my trauma didn't define me. This one is extremely important because trauma, it has a way of developing abilities within you. Some people develop resilience, some people develop discernment, some people develop incredible ability to problem solve, some become exceptional leaders. I've experienced all of those. The problem isn't always the ability. The problem is when the ability remains wounded. When you operate in these abilities from a place of fear and not of trust, you end up possibly hurting others and further hurting yourself. So, what God showed me is that He wants to sanctify what trauma produced, He wants to redeem it, refine it, and heal it. So the thing that helped you survive can become the very thing that advances your purpose. Resilience, discernment, problem solving, leadership, all of those things. even your desire ability to be in isolation for long periods of time. That can also help advance your purpose. Depending on your call, you may need all of those skill sets to advance and endure into your future. So your trauma may explain a part of your story, but it does not define your future. I had to unlearn what the media was teaching me. Everything is trying to disciple you, teach you, train you. The news, social media, entertainment, influencers, television, podcasts, all of those mediums are trying to train you, develop you into doing and being who they think you ought to be. So the question isn't whether you're being influenced, the question is who is influencing you. If we spend more time consuming culture than we are consuming God's word, then eventually culture becomes our authority. And that, folks, is what you are witnessing today. In the previous episode, I talk about the fact of the transitions that I have witnessed over decades of my life. I knew the exact point in time where the culture shifted to a far extreme of debauchery. And it started off as just a seed, which on the front end looks innocent. It really does. And often the things that we encounter and the movements that we encounter often start and appear as being purely innocent. But what we eventually learn is that it wants to not just be an innocent little seed, it wants to grow into a huge tree and forest and overtake everything and everyone to establish its domain in the world and in our individual lives. So, what enters your ears repeatedly eventually settles into your spirit. That's why we have to guard what we watch. We have to guard what we listen to. We have to guard what we entertain because deception rarely arrives looking like deception. It usually arrives looking like truth. I had to unlearn that everything I learned growing up may not have been true. This can be a hard one because many of us have inherited beliefs that we just never questioned. Beliefs about ourselves, beliefs about money, beliefs about success, beliefs about relationships, and beliefs about faith. But at some point, personal growth requires personal responsibility. You have to ask, is this actually true? Is this actually true? For example, growing up, I was an angry child because of my trauma that I was experiencing. And no one in my family really had the tools or the ability to discern that I was in pain. So, therefore, I got labeled as the mean one or the difficult one. Mind you, I was firstborn child. And we all know the firstborn child syndrome. You're usually the one that great expectation is placed upon, that receives a lot of the responsibility. You are the one that usually has to go first. And that comes with consequences, right? So I grew up believing that my personality was wrong because of what I kept hearing and how I was being labeled growing up. But what I learned after a while was no, there's nothing wrong with my personality. I have been shaped and fashioned for the call that I have on my life. So I had to learn how to question what was being said about me in the labels that have been placed upon me. So you have to do the same. Is this actually true? Or have I simply repeated a belief because someone else taught it to me? And God bless parents. We all do the best that we can at the moment. However, sometimes what we're passing on and what we're teaching is not truth. And we have to understand that. And as children, we have to understand that about our parents and so forth, because we're all imperfect people and we all have a different level of understanding and we in development and growth. So it is what it is. But you are responsible for your own growth, your own healing, your own development, and sometimes maturity requires challenging the very beliefs you've carried your entire life. I had to unlearn what faith really is. Faith is not an emotional church service where people are shouting and dancing. It's not the Christian catchphrases that some people have coined the term Christianese. It's not knowing all the right Bible verses or just mastering the Christian language. What faith really is complete surrender, obedience, commitment to trusting God when your feelings and your mind disagree. Faith is living according to God's word when nobody is watching. It's what happens to you when life does get hard or is hard. It's also what happens to you when life is going well. Who do you become? The longer I walk with God, the more I realize that faith isn't proven by what we say. It is proven by how we live. I had to unlearn that God always doesn't remove difficult situations from us, from our lives. This really changed me because I hit the hardest point in my life, the darkest hour after coming off what I would call a high of life. Reconciled with my dad, had a great place to live, met a great husband, had two wonderful children. Life was good, had money in the bank, had a nice car to drive, good business, husband had a good job. Everything was going just fine. I was able to sow seeds into my local church and be part of ministry, had a great church family. Everything was going well. And I remember a friend of mine who was a prophet came to me and she said, "You're getting ready to go to another level." And that false belief of, "Ooh, everything's going well. You mean it's going to get better from here?" Oh boy. I just knew, I give my tithes, I sow into my local church, give my offerings, da da da. I do all of those things. Oh boy, life is just going to be sweet on the by and by. And I hit a wall. I hit a period of my life where we experienced homelessness, food not in our cupboards. We had to wait on the raven. You read that story about Elijah and how his brook dried up and he had to wait on the raven. We had that experience. Had to depend on the kindness of strangers, people I didn't know. Had to move like Abraham to a land that I wasn't familiar. And when I hit that season, boy, I was really trying to figure out what I had done wrong. And then I remember Paula White preaching a message about difficulty in life is not always about what you're doing wrong. What if it's about what you're doing right? Yes, my folks. I wanted God to remove every obstacle, every difficult situation, person, hardship, challenge. But what was really happening was I was being promoted for my faithfulness during a season of abundance and prosperity that I had just come out of. And what God was getting ready to teach me, because I had prayed a prayer In my early 20s, I was selling real estate. I was failing miserably at it. I didn't understand how come other people around me appeared to be as if they were prospering. I had to drop out of school because I was asked to come home to help take care of my terminally ill grandmother. And I was just in a really dark place. And I thought that was the end of my life. And again, I wanted to be removed from that situation. But I learned during that period again that God is always with you. He is always, if you are surrendered, always developing you to have the capacity to get off of what I prayed to be off of, which was life's roller coaster. You see, the trauma that I experienced caused me such pain, and I literally learned how to live and survive on the emotional roller coaster. When the abuse stopped, I was happy. When the abuse began again, I was sad. If you've been in trauma or in difficult situations in life, you know that roller coaster. When things were good, it was a high. When things were bad, it was a low. And I prayed that God would help me to get off that roller coaster because I did not want to suffer the rest of my life being on that roller coaster. So little did I know that God was answering my prayer by taking me through this dark season that I had prayed for maybe about a good 4 or 5 years prior to all of these good things happening in my life. So instead of changing my circumstances, he changed me. Instead of removing the pressure, he strengthened me under it. He taught me peace in chaos, joy in hardship, purpose in pain, strength in weakness. Abundant life, folks, isn't about the absence of problems. It's learning how to thrive while walking through them. And then when you become a leader, and the higher you go, the more people can see you, and there's more people that try to attack you, right? Your enemies become more visible to you because you become more visible. And if you don't learn how to walk amongst the snakes and the witches and the warlocks and the betrayers and the backstabbers and thieves and liars, you will be emotionally unstable and spiritually unstable and immature for the rest of your life. And you will suffer even when things are going well for you. There's a lot of people who prosper and they have what they call survivor's remorse because they allow voices to tell them that they don't really deserve to be there, that it's not fair that they're there. That's what happens when you rise to the top. You become more visible to your enemies. So don't be so quick to rise up. I learned stay hidden, lay low, appreciate that season of your life because there is going to come a season where you're going to rise and you're going to be more visible, not necessarily more vulnerable, if you allow God to develop you when you were in your hidden season. So here's the hard truth. Some of the biggest breakthroughs in your life won't come from learning something new. They'll come from unlearning something false. So think about that. Think about all of the things that you have learned, and there are many. You've learned things about your gender. You've learned things about your race. You've learned things about your personality type, like I did. You learned things about your ability or how people perceived your ability. Maybe you were called dumb and stupid and you would never be anything and all those things. You're going to have to unlearn. Or maybe you've been indoctrinated into religion to the point where you don't even know what it is to have a true relationship with God. Your idea and understanding of God is check the box. Don't do this, do that. Don't do this, don't do that. Do this, don't do that. Not really understanding that true relationship is not about the do's and the don'ts. Because when you truly have a relationship with someone and you love them, you don't really have to be reminded of the don'ts, because you don't want to do anything to someone you love that would break their heart. So it becomes a natural part of your behavior and your display of love and affection to the one that you are in relationship with. No different with God. I remember being in college, and that was the start of my spiritual transformation. Although I had been saved since I was 12, I've always had prophetic gifting. I've always been in communion with God. My character and my wounds had to go through a process of healing and development so that I could have a more deeper relationship with God and be prepared for what God had for me. And I remember losing the desire to listen to certain type of music, losing to the desire to just have constant profanity coming out of my mouth. I didn't have to think about it. I didn't have to really pray about it. I got so engrossed in my relationship with God that those things naturally were pushed out of my life because there was no room. I was too busy singing the praises of the Lord that I didn't have capacity in my mind to do both. I retrained my mind and developed new neural pathways in my mind that allowed me the freedom to focus purely on the Lord. So maybe today God is inviting you to question a belief that you've carried for years. It's unfortunate that, and I'm a person of color, African American, whatever you want to call it. I don't associate with labels because honestly, they don't define my existence. You'll learn that too. But in our world, we like labels, so we'll go ahead with it. But if I were, if I listened to all of this derogatory talk about me being a victim and me not being privileged and me suffering and me just having difficulty in life because people that don't look like me don't want me to prosper and don't want me to advance. If I thought that, where would I be? Where would I be? So we have to be careful what information that we're sharing with those around us and those that we're leading and those that we have influence over. Because we may be planting a seed of deception. Sure, it feels safe. Sure, it feels true, right? Injustice, racism, those things are real, right? We've probably all have experienced some type of discrimination, no matter what color you are. You've been discriminated because you were short versus tall, light, dark, straight hair, curly hair, redhead, blonde. The world is made up of difference, and people are sometimes threatened by difference. So that's just a reality. But the truth is, you can live above that. You can live above natural circumstances and occurrences and natural law. You just have to tap into your spiritual relationship and development within God. So maybe today God is inviting you to challenge some of these beliefs, things you've carried for years. You couldn't be anything because your parents weren't anything, or maybe there's a cycle of defeat and failure, right? So a belief that was born out of pain, a belief that was formed through disappointment, a belief that may be shaped by fear rather than truth. So ask yourself, what do I need to unlearn? What belief is keeping me stuck? What perspective is limiting my growth? What lie have I accepted as truth? Because freedom often begins the moment we're willing to challenge the stories we've been telling ourselves. So thank you for joining me for another episode of The Hard Truth. If today's conversation challenged you, encouraged you, or made you think differently, be sure to share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. And until next time, let's keep seeking the truth, let's keep growing, and let's keep doing the hard work that really leads to true transformation. This is Hard Truth, real talk for real growth. See you in the comments.